Right. Okay, thank you everyone. We'll resume the meeting, and if you could be quiet please and keep those phones silent and to yourselves. So we'd moved and seconded Mr Mohead speak, and I was intending to move around the table unless there's any things that have happened in the meantime. So Councillor Belford, do you wish to speak? I think it's important everyone actually speaks today.
With your forbearance, Mr. Chairman, I have if I could read a bit here to keep my time down to 3 minutes or so.
Oh, sure.
The process we are following to make this investment decision is indefensibly defective. In the overview of her report on the Kaipara Council's mismanagement of its $63 million wastewater scheme, the Auditor General wrote, quote, "This report highlights lessons about governance, such as the need for members of a governing body to have the courage to keep asking questions until they understand what they are deciding," end quote. As councillors, we still await detailed information on critical contractual and financial assumptions. The only financial briefing from HBRC to councillors was verbal and presented in a workshop, a practice also criticized by the Auditor General. As councillors, we have not permitted to engage with a supposedly independent consultant, Deloitte, selected to advise us on the viability of the project, despite the fact that it is we, councillors, not the staff, their insights are intended to satisfy. As we sit here today, Deloitte concedes that it cannot actually give a final assessment of the project's viability. Meanwhile, total mystery prevails around the readiness of farmers to actually back their rhetoric with their dollars and around the conditions and escape clauses they are being offered to do so. Most foolishly, we are asked to authorize an investment today that might be rendered entirely moot by the Board of Inquiry within 48 hours, given HBRC's interpretation, or further challenged in court. And regarding the Board of Inquiry, as much as senior leaders of this council and HBRC attempt to paper over the fact, the draft decision of the Board of Inquiry to reject the environmental mitigation scheme proffered by HBRC is a blow to the credibility of the scheme's leadership team. And if they got it wrong on the plan change, where else have they got it wrong? On the ability of the dam to supply sufficient water in dry years, in the projected increases in farm productivity in an area with serious limiting factors other than water, on the claimed jobs and downstream economic benefits. Critical as they are, my lingering concerns in these areas are trumped by the deficiencies in our decision-making readiness, as I've outlined. From the Kaipara report also, quote, "There is a tendency to discount such points as bureaucratic, but they are fundamental to an effective and trusted public sector. In several reports recently, we have emphasized that in the public sector, decisions have to not only be right, but also be seen to be right. The process for decisions also matters because the use of public money and power has to be clearly and properly authorized," end quote. The process this council is following makes it impossible for me today to properly meet my fiduciary responsibilities to the ratepayers of Hawke's Bay and to their environment. And I was not prepared to hand those responsibilities over to HBRC, anointing them to judge whether requisite conditions are satisfied, which was the recommended proposal. This investment is not ripe for a vote, even a symbolic one, that would suggest that a compelling case has been made, which is where the amended language leaves us today. And so I will be voting against the resolution as proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Belford. I'll keep going around the table. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. I was to move a small amendment and do so, and it's on 8.3.2, and it's just to add some words on to the 40 million cubic metres of water, and that the RWLP has committed to supply 40 million cubic metres. I think it's not sufficient for there to be...
So hang on, so the amendment is
to add the words.
In addition,
yes,
that they are committed to supply,
yes,
40 million cubes,
yes,
as an amendment. Can we get that up there? Is someone happy to second that?
Oh, well, it's a bit...
Lapses.
Well, could I just briefly explain it?
Now let's put it up there.
No, put it up so I can see it.
I think there's concern about the loss of speaking rights.
Sorry?
I think there's a concern about the loss of speaking rights.
Minutes 41. Just add on to that, the ability to supply 40 million cubic metres. So it's both sides of the deal.
It's implicit in it, I think.
Former.
You happy to second that pro forma? Wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. Could I just say that it is implicit, but it's not explicit. And I have, in discussions with people previously, asked if in fact they had a commitment to take water, for example, at the outer extremities of Area B, and no one else is in Area B, would the RWLP supply? And I was told no, probably not, because of the cost. So you could wind up with contracts for 40 million cubic metres, of which many of them the RWLP was not prepared to supply. And if it's not prepared to supply, then the numbers change. So I just think in protecting the interests of the investment this council is going to make on behalf of the ratepayers, we need to make sure that we have both sides of the equation clear. That is both the contract to take and a contract to supply. Mr Chairman, I support water storage. I've always had two conditions. Firstly, that it be financially viable, and the second, that it meet all the environmental tests. The environmental tests have been undertaken by the Board of Inquiry, and it's beyond this council to determine that. What it's now left to is to the financial tests. Big projects have had a checkered history in New Zealand. Some have gone well, some have gone badly. And for this council, we are challenged because we have, as I see it, three responsibilities. Firstly, we are undertaking the work as a developer. Secondly, we have to be the protections of the environment. And thirdly, we have to be the guardians of the ratepayers' money. It's not our money, it's the ratepayers' money. It's $80 million and it's a lot of money. The plans that we've seen so far I have found wanting. There are quite a large number of moving parts which are still not clear. Now, some people would argue that we should just simply do this on the basis of trust. Trust people. Well, I need to say to you, Chair, I wasn't elected to council to hand on responsibilities on the basis of trust. I was elected here to exercise responsibilities as an elected councillor. And one of those is a fiduciary duty, which is a word we used a lot. And in the past, a fiduciary duty was easily met. The test was relatively low, in my opinion, that, for example, companies could say, well, we got advice from the CEO or the Chief Financial Officer, and we relied upon that. But a string of financial company collapses has seen the bar shifted. The court has made it very clear that directors are expected to make inquiries of themselves and be satisfied both individually and collectively that the information being relied upon and the advice being given is what they genuinely believe for themselves. Not anybody else. There's no delegation here. These fiduciary duties are not quite as well laid out for councils, but I think we all are required to adhere to what I would call the highest standard of fiduciary duty on behalf of our council. There's been a number of significant changes. When this first started and I became actively involved at the council level, one of the basic assumptions was that we were going to have elevated levels of nitrogen in the tuki-tuki to the point of toxicity. The Board of Inquiry came out with its interim decision and said it was going to be 0.8. At 0.8, we had some extraordinary responses. One, somebody said that it was going to turn the lights out in Central Hawke's Bay. Another, someone called into question the sanity of the decision and the logic and the reasoning of the chair of the Board of Inquiry, a High Court judge, no less. So on the one hand, we have people saying that this is recommended and it will work. On the other, we have advice in the public domain that at 0.8 this will not work. We also have a number of other elements for which we have received no advice yet. I have to say that the answer to Councillor Graham's request for a copy of the Water Users Agreement I find unsatisfactory. Whether Councillor Graham wishes to get his fingers into it, or up to his elbows, or up to his armpits, is of no matter to anybody else here. Whatever information Councillor Graham wants, he should have access to. Should not be censored, should not be stopped. I just think that is plain wrong. There are other issues here which people have asked for and have not been given. I don't like this. I feel uneasy about this. If we were dealing with a company and a company director asked of an investor who wanted $80 million to see such a document, it would be produced forthwith. Forthwith. When you're asking for $80 million, you expect to have the highest level of information, the most thorough. Whatever people want, they should get. And I have to say to you, it has not been forthcoming. I also, coming to this meeting, had a serious concern, a deep concern, that we were, as councillors, were going to hand over our fiduciary and governance responsibilities to HBRC. Now, it's been put to me that here that we should simply trust people. Is this a question of not trusting them? Well, I have to say to councillors and everybody else, I'm not elected here to just simply trust people. Of course I trust people, but I'm elected here to make certain decisions for my own knowledge and and be confident in the information I base them on is known to me, and I support it entirely. Now, as the decision stood, we were going to transfer that responsibility to HBRC. The amendment that's been put up satisfies me to some extent that the information is going to come back to this council and council are going to sign off on it. So it's mollified my concern somewhat. But I still have an underlying concern that there are many things which we are not privy to yet. And I'm not prepared to put my name to something until I am fully satisfied that every detail is known and I am satisfied. The problem I have here, again, which it seems to make light of, is the fact that the Castalia report has not been updated and we can't direct it to. The reason I'm concerned about this is because I've seen the spreadsheets, not seen the spreadsheets, seen slices of the spreadsheets. I understand the mathematics and the logic behind them, that the financial viability of this Ruataniwha water storage scheme is based on quite a rapid uptake of people taking water. Now, if the lower levels of dissolved inorganic nitrogen in the tuki allowable reduces farmer uptake in the future considerably, then the financial viability of the scheme in the long term is in jeopardy, notwithstanding the fact that we have passed the minimum threshold of 40 million cubic metres. What I am concerned about is what the finances of this project is going to be like in 5, 10, 20 years' time. If the uptake is much lower than what we have now, we will have a debt on our hands. Now, I want to be assured that that is not the case. I don't want to be making a decision today which will have a real good feel-good factor. All the issues that people have said from Central Hawke's Bay have, I empathise with. Yes, I've seen the community decline. Yes, I've seen people shift away. Yes, I've seen people want to have greater development. I have lived through this myself as a young person. I understand it. I empathise with it. But when I come here to make a decision, I have to make a decision on the basis of the ratepayers in the long term, which is over the 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And I have to be convinced. At the moment, I am not convinced. So I'm saying to HBRC, to the officers of the HBRC, and anybody else who's going to come here and advise us, that you are going to need to convince me that this project is going to work in the long term, that the numbers are going to run well, and that I can have confidence in them, that the gaps that are there need to be filled, and if that can be achieved, then at that point I will consider voting for it. But at this stage, I am not of that mind. Yes, it's a vote in principle as I see it, but I want to make it clear it's going to have to cut the mustard for me on every level. I do not want to vote today, here today, and have the council or its successors, should there be an amalgamation, 10 or 15 years' time, saying the damn numbers do not stack up because the estimates that they had were not done properly. I'm not going to do a job which is half done. So that's where I sit at the moment. So I'm suggesting the amendment to make sure that if it's 40 million cubic metres to take, then it's 40 million cubic metres are going to be supplied. If that's satisfied, it's a point for me. And after that, I need to see all of the numbers.
Thank you. Councillor Dick.